Hopefully everybody can hear me. Hi, and now see me. Get situated here. If you can see me and hear me and you can see the chat, can you just chime in and say hello so I know everything is working? That would be great. I'm going to make sure there's enough light on my face and then we're going to jump in. I'm so excited to have everybody here. Great. Okay, Erica's here. And Ingrid, hello. Excellent. Okay, so people are chiming in and hopefully some more people will jump in. This is going to be recorded, so I can send the recording out as well. So thanks so much for being here. I'm excited about this, and I hope that you are as well, and that you get incredible value out of this time, everybody's time. Hi, Catherine. Everybody's time is super valuable, so I am happy that you have chosen to spend this time with me and with each other. The only kind of bummer is that we can't all see each other on this masterclass and this webinar, but we can chat. I have the chat on private. There are some discussions that I want to have and some sharing later on in the masterclass, and I felt like it might be a little bit easier if the chat is private, but if folks feel open at that point in our time together and you want to share openly and see what other people are saying, I can certainly change the chat to public, but I'll also be sharing people's responses anonymously. So let's get started. This is Revolutionize Your Self-Care, and this is really about gaining confidence and, very important, self-compassion to live with greater ease and vitality. Hopefully you can see, I'm pretty sure you can see the slides. So you are in the right place if you've been complaining, if you feel stuck in patterns that don't serve you, if you've been procrastinating your self-care, if you've been experiencing fear and anxiety, if you know that you are not the best version of yourself, if you have cycles of ruminating thoughts, raise your hand. If you're grumpy, if you're dissatisfied with how things are, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you're having trouble making decisions, if any of these things or all of these things or many of these things are plaguing you, you have come to the right place. So my promise to you is to bring you some new insights, some new information, and that you will leave with a renewed or new, if that's where you are, commitment to your well-being. And also that you'll leave with the clarity and the confidence to follow through with your commitment to yourself. So I know that because you're here and that you've signed up for this and you've already chosen to spend this time, I know that you already have a level of commitment to your wellness and self-care, and my promise to you is to sort of up the ante in your commitment. So in return, I ask you to stay for the entire masterclass, that you keep an open mind, and that you reach out to me with questions. So that can happen throughout this masterclass. It can also happen after we're done. So I invite everybody to take the opportunity, especially because this is an anonymous and safe space. Nobody knows who's here except for me, and most of you I don't know personally. You can't see each other, and the chat is private, so it's a place that you can be honest with yourself. Take notes. See what comes up for you. There are some activities that I'm going to ask you to do during this time, and so hopefully you have some paper, a notebook, pen, whatever you have, or maybe you'll type it out. Be open to getting all the value that this has to offer, and take an active approach. So reach out. I'm here to support you. Others might have some suggestions as well. And so if you don't participate or reach out, then I can't support you. So what we're going to cover: 3 massive mistakes to avoid when taking care of yourself. These are very closely connected to my 5 pillars for building sustainable resilience. We're going to talk about a framework. We're going to talk about what resilience is. We're going to talk about sustainability. And my offer to you of a self-care subscription coaching community program. So this is all going to tie in together, and that's what we're going to cover in the next hour. Okay, I have for everybody a PDF that's called The 4 Biggest Barriers to Planning for and Practicing Sustained Self-Care. So I will make sure that everybody gets that at the end of this masterclass. I think you will find it incredibly worth your time reading. It's not very long, but some really great nuggets of information. We aren't going to cover any of the content of that PDF tonight, but we are going to talk about barriers, but we just aren't going to talk about the specific barriers that I identify in that PDF. So I'm going to make sure that everybody that attends today receives that bonus. Okay, I love this picture. I love that the trees to me represent these pillars and that there's a path through these pillars. And to me, it really, really signifies my pillars and my framework and what we are trying to accomplish today, which is really about doing this together. So do you want peace? I want peace in my life, in my heart, in my head, and I want to do this together. So let's walk this path together, and we're going to start that tonight. So the number one way, finding my self-compassion, was the number one way that I took control of my wellness and implemented self-care as an uncompromisable necessity. So when I think about self-compassion, and I identified self-compassion as the number one way that I took control of my wellness, what that means for me has been 2 things. One is letting go of perfectionism, and 2, letting go of being responsible for others. And so I consider myself a recovering perfectionist. So I anticipate that that's a lifelong journey, and that's okay. That's great. That's definitely part of my self-compassion. And the putting me first through self-compassion also is tied into not taking responsibility for other people. So, and not to be confused with being responsible to other people, which we'll talk a little bit about later, but the difference being not being responsible for others. Okay, that's where it lies for me in terms of self-compassion. And that might be different for everybody, but I do think that in your top 3 ways of how you might take control over your wellness, that self-compassion, self-love has got to fall in somewhere in those top 3. Okay, so why am I doing this? Why should you listen to me? Who am I? So I'm a licensed master social worker. I'm an educator. I use the word educator as opposed to teacher, as opposed to professor, because it's all encompassing. So I have been an educator in public school, in private school, as a Title I tutor. I have been an educator in a cooperative extension where I teach, parenting programs, nutrition and wellness, and money management, and life skills to the community. I've also been an undergraduate university professor and a master's level university professor. So, and in my work as a self-care and wellness coach, this involves a lot of education. So I say educator. I am a certified coach. I shy away from using the descriptor life coach because I think that's gives people a certain perception that I'm a coach. I'm a metaphysical minister, a musician, and I think more importantly, a lifelong seeker of wellness, balance, and ease. And I'm going to give you a little bit more detail as to what I mean by lifelong. So it is unusual that my self-care journey started as early in life as it did. But I was a child, and before age 10, I started having chronic symptoms, stomach aches and pain in my ankle, and shortly after that I started to get migraines at age 9, and then chronic headaches at age 11, knee pain at 12, shoulder pain, etc., to the point where I was at the doctor's all the time, getting blood work, getting testing done. What is wrong? Why are you in so much pain? You're too young, and what's going on? So a lot of physical symptoms. Certainly a lot of other things in my life could be pointed to those physical symptoms. A lot of stress, trauma, and also just personally, I took on a lot. I took on a lot of responsibility for the people around me. I thought a lot about big world stuff, social justice issues, poverty and homelessness, partly from, the area that we lived in and what I got to see and experience and what I was exposed to. I thought about, domestic violence and mental illness and addiction. And I spent a lot of time as a kid thinking about these issues, fighting against bullying and being an advocate for my, fellow, kids and students that I was in school with. And so all of this culminated into me having burnout at 16. So I was in bed, I finally got a whole slew of diagnoses, and I was depressed, and I spent months in bed. And that started my journey of self-care and wellness. And so very young to start that, but also kind of an amazing parallel journey of my own healing and my education as a healer. So all along, as I'm working with my own healers on myself, I am learning, I am learning the bigger picture of what my life is about as a healer and an educator and a minister and an advocate. And so very much been a parallel process, and one that I have embraced and feel incredibly grateful for. And so when I say lifelong, I truly mean lifelong. So that's a little bit about my story. Transformation-wise, it's really, for me, mindfulness always and self-compassion. And so again, with the self-compassion, letting go of perfectionism, letting go of my responsibility for others. I do want to talk about the mindfulness always and kind of what that looks like, because mindfulness is a buzzword these days. Everything is about mindfulness. I read an article earlier today about mindful parenting. I've been teaching mindfulness for quite a number of years, as well as meditation. So just practically speaking, in terms of my transformation and in terms of how it manifests for me as mindfulness every day, this is what it looks like. So I wake up and I have a system, a very, a non-defined system where I check in with myself all day long about what I need. And so in the morning, it might be, do I sleep a little longer? Do I jump right up out of bed? Do I, try to get my son going, who's 2.5, and, go for a walk? Or is it a day that, is it a work day for me? And do I, jump right on the computer and get a few things done? Or do I need to go to the gym first? Is it a gym day at all? Or is it a stay in my office and do some yoga and some physical therapy exercises? So all day, starting from when I wake up in the morning, I am in assessment mode of kind of a mindfulness of what I need. And that, involves eating. Do I need something warm? Do I need something cold? If I'm driving to work, I think about how I'm going to get there. I don't always go the same way. I think about, do I need to be energized? Do I need to go a certain road where I don't normally go because I want to see something different? Or do I need a quiet road where I get to see a lot of trees? So I assess my way through the day through this mindfulness practice of figuring out what it is that I need. So energetically, aesthetically, and depending on what the answer is, then I plan accordingly. I move into the next part of my day based on that assessment. And so, so being very present and very mindful of what I need all day long has been part of my transformation. Okay, so then what does all that mean? So this means that in general, most of the time, I feel at ease and in balance with myself and my life and my choices. And I can advocate for myself from that place of balance because I've already gone through the process of assessing what I need. And that living in that state of mindfulness gives me all the information that I need. Okay, most importantly, I feel confident in my decisions. Essentially, I don't feel any regrets. I feel empowered. I feel that I'm living my truth. Okay, I know the answers when I ask myself, what do I need? And I feel free to move in any direction at any given time. So I don't fear change. It doesn't mean that I don't, have anticipation around it or some anxiety, but for the most part, if I am mindful and I've assessed and I've determined that I need something and I move in that direction, I don't have any fear around that. Okay, so this is, we're moving into kind of now you know a little bit about me and why I'm here, and hopefully you feel like I have something important to say based on my experience. We're going to get into the content and first touch on the 3 mistakes to avoid. So these are the 3 mistakes that most people make when planning, not only for their self-care and for wellness, but really for any behavior change. So the first thing is not planning. So not planning for your self-care. Second one is not identifying the barriers to your self-care. And the third is not setting up a support system. So you'll note right away that how I talk about self-care is more global, is a little bit more systemic and less specific. I'm not talking about any specific self-care activities. I'm talking about a framework for sustainability, okay? So let's get into each one of these. All right, so not making a plan. Okay, mistake number 1. This is basic to behavior change, which is the hardest thing that we do as humans is to change our behavior. And if we don't have a plan to behavior change, to change our behavior or to reach a goal that we don't have a plan to do that, it's almost assuredly not going to happen. It could happen. It's probably going to take longer. It's probably going to be harder. You'll probably have a lot more doubts and stumbles along the way. It's possible that you could still reach the goal or change the behavior. But the statistics are pretty significant in a written plan getting you to your goal much faster and much easier. So we're going to talk, believe me, we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about my 5 pillars. Okay, not identifying barriers to self-care. So this is in my years of teaching human behavior, which I did for quite a while, and anger management and change. This was the biggest thing, is that people don't identify, because this is not fun, but people don't identify the challenges. Who wants to do that? When you're thinking of your goals and all the things you want to accomplish, the last thing you want to think of is, what are all the barriers, right? What are all the roadblocks? What is going to get in my way? It's not what we want to think about. So generally people don't. They just skip over this part. But what happens when you skip over this part is you are certainly going to come across a barrier in your path to behavior change. And if you come across a barrier and you haven't identified it, what most people do is kind of fall apart. They think, oh, I'm not going to reach my goal now. I've fallen into this, into this pit. I'm not going to get there. Or a lot of people think, well, I failed. And they don't even think of it as a barrier or a pitfall. They think of it as a failure, period. And then the next step is, when you think about your barriers ahead of time and you can plan for them, you can figure out and problem solve how you might get around and through and over and under, get around those barriers before you ever reach them. So that when you get there, you recognize this is just a bump in the road. This is not a failure. This is something that I've thought about, I've considered. Here are 3 possible solutions. Let's see what's going to work. One example that I used to give a lot was smoking. So If you are partnered up, if you're a smoker and you're partnered up with a smoker and you want to quit smoking and your partner has no intention of quitting smoking, you better have some pretty good strategies for getting around that barrier, because that's a major barrier in you reaching your goal of quitting smoking if you live with somebody or you're partnered with somebody who is a smoker. And believe it or not, these are things that people do, often. They have these goals with these really big barriers that they're not even considering. Okay, so that is big mistake number 2, probably big mistake number 1. Okay, and let's see, mistake number 3, not setting up a support system. So these themes, these 3 mistakes are themes. They're going to run through the 5 pillars, and then they're going to come up again when I introduce my coaching community program. So setting up a support system. This comes back, which I'll repeat several times tonight, to my understanding and my definition of revolution in terms of self-care, and why I think that what I am offering and what I'm talking about in relation to self-care is truly revolutionary. And I don't use that term loosely. So this idea of setting up a support system, when we use the term self-care, we think of individualism, right? We think of myself. It's something that I do by myself, for myself, and I am here to challenge that notion and say to you that I don't think we can do anything by ourselves, truly anything. I don't think energetically there's anything we do while we're human beings on the earth that we're doing in isolation, even if we think we are. That we have information coded in ourselves from previous generations, to something that sort of esoteric, to the fact that we're eating food that somebody else has grown, and that food is sustaining us through our days, and we couldn't do what we do without that food. We all have friends and family that support us in a number of ways, some of which are more overt than others. But even when we think we're doing something by ourselves, we're not. And so setting up an intentional support system in order to practice self-care regularly, sustainably, which we'll talk about, is another misstep. And I think a big part of that is because we're not intentional enough in general about self-care, but also because we think about it as an individual act. Okay, so resilience. A word I like to use in relationship to resilience is elasticity. So it allows for you to bounce back. You can imagine an elastic, right? Bounce back from whatever threatens to get you down or hold you back. Right? So I think that's a really beautiful definition. What does it mean to be resilient, right? We use these words, we sort of understand it, but in practical, applicable ways, what does it mean? It means feeling and being grounded. It means confidently walking the self-care talk. It means thriving, right? Not surviving. And this is going to tie into one of my pillars, which is about prevention, right? Rather than intervention, which I see in surviving is more intervening and prevention is tied more to thriving. And this is all about being resilient, okay? Having elasticity. Okay, I'm going to take a drink of water and we're going to get into the 5 pillars. Okay, feel free to write something in the chat if this is good. If you have a thought, if you have a question, if you think, oh my gosh, this isn't what I expected at all, or wow, this is really great, whatever you have, anything, let me know that you're there and that you're listening. Okay, so 5 pillars to create sustainable resilience. So this is part of the subtitle of the book that I published and released this past spring. And this is a framework for creating this resilience that I'm talking about, this sustainable self-care, okay? And the first pillar is defining self-care for yourself. The second pillar is writing a value statement. The third is making a self-care plan. The fourth is recognizing impairment and focusing on prevention. We're going to mostly be talking about the prevention piece. And the fifth one is supporting others in their self-care plan. Okay, you'll start to see the same themes and ideas come up as I keep talking. And I'm going to keep tying it together and repeating some of the most important pieces that I want you to get out of tonight's masterclass. Okay, so defining self-care. How can you practice self-care? Okay, at all, let alone sustainable self-care, if you've never defined what it means to you. Okay, there's no universal definition. So you know, as a social worker, I'm a trained, licensed master social worker. I teach graduate school, so I teach other social workers how to be professionals, and self-care is in our code of ethics. In fact, I have my code of ethics book somewhere right here on my desk, okay? My social work code of ethics. I keep it on my desk. Self-care is part of my code of ethics as a professional. So we teach it to our students. So I've gone through undergraduate, graduate school. You know, I've been practicing for 20 years. I've been teaching for in the university system for 11. We talk about it in our classes with our students. And in all that time, nobody has ever asked me to define self-care. So when I was writing my book, that occurred to me is pretty shocking, was pretty shocking to me that was the case. And so I think before you do anything in terms of creating a plan or thinking about sustainability, before you do anything, you have to define it, right? Like, what is it? So I'm going to put that out to you. I'm going to take just a minute. Not long, but I'd love for you to brainstorm. Okay, I am an educator, so I'm always making people do activities, right? I don't think that we can just get information and have behavior change. We have to take action. So I'm going to make you do that here in this masterclass. Let's take some action. And I want you to just do a brainstorm. Brainstorm means there's no judgment, there's no right or wrong, nothing has to be flushed out, nothing has to be cleaned up. This is just writing some things down and see what comes up, okay? So I'm gonna take a minute and please share in the chat anything that comes up that you feel like sharing. It's totally anonymous. No one is gonna see the chat except for me. So anything that comes up in your brainstorm in terms of what self-care is to you, please post it in the chat, and then I can share people's brainstorms, you know, with the group so that we can see all of the different things that self-care is for people. Okay, so go ahead and let's just take probably even less than a minute. I'll kind of look at the clock here and see how we're doing. It's 5:30. Okay, and take a minute and just do a brainstorm. Hopefully people will be willing to share. Hopefully you're all still there listening. And just jump right into the chat as you're writing things down. What does self-care mean to you? It can be a picture, you can draw a picture, you can scribble, you can, you know, write a sentence, you can write a bunch of words that aren't even related. Literally brainstorm anything that comes up, and then please just share in the chat. Saying yes to my desires. Ooh, I like that. See, I would never come up with that. It's great. It's so great to see what other people come up with. It's not language I would use for myself, right? Listening to myself. So mind, body, and spirit, listening to myself. That's how this person, one of the things this person came up with, right? That she shared. Thank you for that. Being mindful of the big picture. Yeah. So it's interesting because those two things are really opposite, right? So self-care, listening to myself is really the details, right? The listening to my mind, body, and spirit. And that really ties into what I was talking about with mindfulness all the time. But then also big picture, right? Big picture surroundings, having a solid sense of awareness. Mm-hmm. Yep. And that would be something, if I were coaching you, I would say, well, what does that mean? What does a solid sense mean? What does awareness mean? Right. So then you get, that's not in the brainstorm, right? But that's like next steps. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome brainstorm. Good. Anybody else? Ask myself how I would feel if I don't do the thing I desire because I surrender to the should tasks that put others' needs before my own. I'm going to say that again. Ask myself how I would feel if I don't do the thing I desire because instead, she doesn't write the word instead, I surrender to the should tasks that put others' needs before my own. So I think fundamentally that's partly why we're sort of all in trouble, right? Why we don't feel well, why we're exhausted, why we are, disillusioned or disappointed, or right. There's an incredible Buddhist chant that goes like this: Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and it's my happiness, individual happiness, my happiness equals world happiness. That if I don't have happiness, and I tend to shy away from the word happy, but let's use the word desire. If my desires, my needs are not met, then the world's needs are not met. And so the idea that we're putting our needs on hold in order to attend to somebody else's is really quite backwards, because if we're all doing that, or a lot of us are doing that a lot of the time, then we really have it backwards. Paying attention to my needs and doing what is best for me. And the thing is that doing what's best for me, right, for the self, is what's doing best for the world, for others, for your family. And yes, it's about balance, but it's actually quite fundamental. And I'm sure you all have heard, the idea that self-care is not selfish, right? And in that way, people can get very confused that doing for yourself and doing for yourself first is in fact quite the opposite of selfish, right? Because if you attend to your needs and you are taken care of and you are thriving and you are living your truth and living in your values, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, then you are giving the world your best self, and therefore creating change in others and empowering others to do the same and having fundamentally a much bigger impact. So it's quite profound if we can embrace that. Awareness, meaning what's going on around me, interacting with the world around me in all ways. Yeah, so there's some big stuff here. Thank you all so much for sharing. Okay, so this is the first pillar, is defining self-care. So of course you can take that and run with it and do some more. We're going to move on to the second pillar, which is values statement. So have you ever written a value statement? My guess is no, but maybe some of you have. Do you know what your core values are? And probably you do, but if someone's never asked you that question, it may be that you could spend some time actually writing down, which we're going to do, of course, some values. My next question is, do you live within those values? Do you value wellness and self-care? Living your values, and here's the two sides of this values coin to me. So for one, living your values is a form of self-care. I think probably the highest form of self-care for me. And if you value self-care, then you're going to practice self-care. So it exists on both sides of the coin. Super powerful. So in organizations, most organizations have mission statements, many have vision statements, but the third piece is a value statement. And a lot of organizations, businesses, education systems don't take that third step, or maybe the first step, in writing a value statement. So here's the thing about values. The values are the why. Okay. And so I think that that's where we start, and that's where we go from, is establishing your why, so that everything else makes sense. Everything else is easier. All your decisions about how you spend your time, who you spend your time with, what you do for work, literally every decision, the way that you spend your money, how much money you make or want to make, or the food you buy, or the stores that you shop at, all of your decisions can come back to your core set of values. And that is also self-care. And if you are living, at least most of the time, if you're living within your value system very intentionally, then you are living self-care. You are going to feel like you're taking care of yourself, right? In a very fundamental way. And then if one of your values is wellness and or self-care, then you are also going to be intentional above and beyond living in your values. You're going to have more intention around specific activities that you're doing to be well. So my next task for you is to brainstorm your values. Now, this can be a list of values, or it can be a value statement. My suggestion, I think, for now would just be listing some values. And while you do that, so go ahead and get started thinking about your values. And I'll give you this to think about as you're brainstorming. Values can change. So, in fact, all of this can change. Your definition of self-care today, as you're brainstorming, may be different than it will be in 5 years or in 20 years. It may, if somebody asked you 10 years ago, you probably would have had a different answer. And so one of the things that's important about these pillars is that they are things that you come back to regularly in your life, so that you can stay on top of them, so that they really truly act as pillars in your life towards your wellness. Excuse me. So some values may not change. Some values, like I value my family. What does that mean to me? It means that, I spend time and resources, being near them, talking to them, thinking about them, taking care of them, whatever it is around, my family, right? That's probably not going to change. But there may be a value, like a time in my life, I'll share, something I was thinking about earlier, in my 20s, when I valued adventure and travel, and now I'm still an adventurer and I'm still a traveler, but I don't need those things like I used to. I've checked off a lot of boxes, and if I didn't have a lot of travel adventures, or even any more in my life, I'd be fine, because I've had so many, right? So I wouldn't put that so high on my values list as I once did. And so in my 20s, and even in my 30s, that dictated a lot of my decisions. But in my 40s, not so much. And so when I am traveling or having these travel adventures, I think, do I want to be spending this time and these resources on something that, maybe at one time I really valued, but right now it's not working for me in the same way, right? That's all about my self-care. What do I need? Right? What do I need to feel well, to be relaxed, to feel healthy? Okay, so awesome. So please start to share. Some shares are starting to come in around values. If I value self-care and live it as far as what I eat, what I use, what I wear, what I buy, every little thing is an intentional decision for my own self-care, but also my children and the world and the earth. It almost becomes not self-care because it's so much work and stress. In other words, it's not enough. Okay, interesting. So yes, I can certainly see that. And so part of that would be really thinking about the two different sides of it, right? So how you would establish living within your values and what your values were, and how that would manifest for you, how you would feel about that. But also, you're saying it's not enough. No, it's only one part of it, right? One part of the equation. The other part of the equation is that one of your values is wellness and self-care. And so what are the intentional activities that you do around that, right? But feeling good about the choices that you make, because you're making choices based on your value system, to me is part of self-care. Okay, awesome. Anybody else have something to share around their values? Okay, if anything comes up in your brainstorm and you want to share, please do. Okay, self-care plan. So this is the third pillar. It comes back to one of the mistakes that people make, mistakes to avoid when you are self-caring, right? Which is making a plan. So the mistake is to not make a plan, right? And more on top of actually having a plan is using SMART goals. So what does that mean? I'm going to take you through this. Having a SMART goal. So having a goal that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So specific. If you want to lose weight, how much weight do you want to lose? Okay? Measurable. Do you want to lose 10 pounds in 6 months? Do you want to lose 10 pounds in 6 weeks? Okay, so the specific and the measurable and the time bound, well, they all go together. By when, right? And can you even break it up further? So maybe if you want to lose 10 pounds in 6 months, maybe you lose 5 pounds in 3 months. Maybe not, but that's something to consider. So the more specific and the more measurable and the more time bound, the more able you are to reach your goals. So some other examples, exercise. Well, I want to exercise more. Well, that's not specific enough and it's not measurable. So how often? Do you want to exercise, 40 minutes 3 times a week? Is it cardio? Is it weights? Is it yoga? What kind of exercise? How are you measuring? If you use the word more, right? I wanna eat more vegetables. Well, how many vegetables do you eat now, right? And what is more? What is more to you? Is it 3 servings a day instead of 2? Is it whatever it is that you're trying to define as your goal? Be as specific and as possible so that it can be measurable. Achievable. Okay, is it achievable? Is your goal achievable? Do you have what you need? Do you have the materials that you need? Do you have the time that you need? Do you have the knowledge that you need? This is important because you don't want to set yourself up for failure. Okay, you want this to be motivational. And so the achievable piece is really important. The relevant piece comes back to values. And this is directly tied in to the goals and values. And if you have a goal that doesn't fit your values or vice versa, you may want to consider one or the other and figure out what is kind of not aligned. Okay, so a self-care plan can have any number of categories. In my book, I have a self-care plan, and there are a certain number of categories, but you can Google self-care plans, and there are all different kinds of plans with different categories. And this is something that also may change over time. I saw one plan that has an artistic category or creative. I can't remember. I think it was artistic. And that might be something that you would include in your plan or not. But there are different categories like emergency self-care, financial self-care, physical self-care, psychological self-care, and that you would have SMART goals written down ideally for each part of your plan. Okay, so that is pillar number 3. Pillar number 4 is prevention. So this is part of my revolution. Okay, so this is about prevention first. and rather than intervention. So I think predominantly our societies, our human nature is to live by intervening only if absolutely necessary, right? That we want everything to be well. We like to pretend, and we like to sort of move forward without kind of planning for and building in, prevention, right? So I advocate for preventing the need to intervene in the first place. And so that's what I see as having a sustainable self-care plan. That's what I see, that's what it can offer, right? It's a prevention plan if it's sustainable. And what I find interesting about this is that I think for the most part, people use self-care as an intervention. So, they had a tough week and they, sort of cliche, but, take a bubble bath, have a glass of wine. And that is certainly self-care. And if you had an extra tough week and on top of your already planned self-care, you may need that intervention and extra self-care. And that's certainly important. But oftentimes that's all that people have, right, is those interventions as opposed to a prevention plan. And so that's what I'm advocating for. Okay, and my last pillar is supporting others. So, and I've already talked about this, but the need to have support and to give support in order for all of us to be successful. I don't think that it can happen any other way but for us to do it together. So to live sustainably in self-care is a community effort, okay? So some examples. If you want to exercise more and you want to get up early, at 6 o'clock in the morning and, run a mile or take an hour-long walk, you would probably be more successful if you had somebody to do that with, right? If you had somebody to show up and knock on your door, or you took turns knocking on each other's doors at 6 in the morning and walking together, you'd probably be more successful at that. If you hired a nutritionist to help you do grocery lists and plan your meals for the week, you'd probably have more success towards your, eating and nutrition goals, right? So whatever it is that we do, if we do it together, we have a level of support and accountability and motivation that we don't have if we're trying to do it ourselves. The second class that I took when writing my book, we were paired up with somebody, and we were accountability buddies. And I'm actually still in touch a year later with my accountability buddy. And during the book writing process, we met every week via video, every Friday. And we shared our list of goals for the week, what we wanted to accomplish that week. And we checked in with each other via email on the following Tuesday. So halfway through our week, how are you doing reaching your goals? Is there anything you need from me, kind of a thing? And then Friday, we would reconvene. How did you do? Did you reach your goals? Okay, what are your goals for this week? And there's enormous value in that system. So giving that support and receiving that support equally really creates this energy of commitment and sustainability. Okay, so that is my fifth pillar. All right, so we're at 48 minutes. I hope you're still with me and getting value out of this. I'd love for you to look at these questions and type up in the chat any answers that you have for any of these. So a commitment to yourself. We're talking about self-care. What have you tried so far? Why do you think it isn't working? So certainly there's plenty of things that you might have tried that you are implementing, and things that are working. Certainly share that as well. What are you going to try next? So in other words, why are you here tonight? What are you hoping for? What are your next steps in self-care to get you even further down your commitment and your path towards wellness, towards your vision of wellness? And if you had to do something in the next 5 minutes, what would it be? So if you had to up the ante for your self-care in the next 5 minutes, is there something specific that you know that you could do that would make a difference? So let's just take a minute. We're at 49 minutes. Let's take a minute and type it in. Share any answers to any of those questions. Previous question on values. Good. I'll share that. Feeling connected enough to my values that I feel safe and comfortable in letting others know what my values are and how these determine my willingness to participate in their lives and requests on my time. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't read this out. Don't need to read this out. Oh, don't need to. Okay. But you're okay that I did. Okay. Thanks. I'll leave that. Okay, I'll leave that. We'll move into these questions. Okay, anyone tried so far walking at 5:30 a.m. with a friend? Okay, so it was good that I used that as an example. Okay, is it working? Is walking at 5:30 a.m. with a friend, is it working? Mostly. Awesome. How have you figured out how to make it work? Do you share, is it every day? Is it when you feel like it? Is it, 3 times a week? Do you keep it fluid? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. Great. This also ties into being mindful. Yeah, no problem if someone pulls out. Yeah. So it also ties in with this 5:30 a.m. thing would never work for me for a number of reasons right now in my life. It's worked in the past. It'll hopefully work in the future. I never thought I was a morning person until I started working with a naturopath, and it was determined based on my blood type that exercising first thing in the morning was the best thing for me. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that. But of course, it turns out the whole package of what I was learning about my systems, that getting up first thing in the morning and exercising was great. And it's not working for me right now, but that's okay. It's information that I have that I can assess, later. But knowing that about yourself is important in determining kind of what you do, like getting up at 5:30 to walk with a friend. Okay, someone else says, I try to exercise 5 days a week. I like doing it, but it creates stress for me. Yeah, one of the barriers is lack of sleep. So then it's balancing, right? So in the balance, does it have to be 5 days a week? If you're not sleeping enough or it's creating stress, then it's taking away from the self-care. So where is the balance, right? Yes. So not having the personal time and energy to make the self-care sustainable. And I think part of that, probably most people feel to some degree, more or less depending on how much support each individual has, but also because I think a lot of people try to do it by themselves, right? Okay, awesome. So it's 53 minutes. So now what? So I'm going to tell you about my community group coaching program, okay? And this is about applying today's information to own your self-care, not to your own, but to own your self-care, okay? And this is about not doing it alone, right? So this is about doing it in community, getting the support that you need, using the community-minded spirit and energy to not go it alone, which can make all the difference in the world, okay? So this is my belief system. It's time to practice self-care, intentionally engaging in multiple ways that help us to feel well in a number of areas in our life, and taking control so that we feel empowered to be well. And so this is really, to me, the revolution boils down to those two pieces that I've talked about, which is self-care first, which is the prevention idea, and self-care together. Okay, so self-care is not an intervention. It can be, but I'm advocating for something more. And it's not something that you do by yourself necessarily, for yourself even, but it's self-care together. Okay. So signing up for this masterclass is definitely, it's intentional, it's taking action, it can shift energy dramatically in the direction of wellness. And I am inviting you to take this one step further to really discover your worth and make that commitment to yourself, okay? All right, so when I talk about this work and I talk about the revolution and I talk about self-care first, I'm talking about mindfulness and compassion, intention, and love, right? I'm not talking about a fight, which often we think about when we think of a revolution. So this is really about the how. This program, this community program is the how for establishing self-care as a permanent and important part of your everyday life, right? So it isn't, it's the nuts and bolts, the practical pieces, the hard work, okay? All right, so my promise to you is that through this community coaching program, you'll gain confidence, inspiration, tools, structure, big one, to practice and maintain self-care so that you can step off the merry-go-round of busyness and exhaustion and move into hope, resilience, stability, wellness, and love for yourself and for others. Okay, so being a part of a community, doing it together, I mean, a community of 2, yes, but a community of 10, great. Inspiration, people are going to have ideas that you didn't have, that I don't have. Accountability, huge. Cannot be underestimated that we hold each other accountable to reaching our goals. Holding each other accountable is usually seen as negative, as pressure. I see it as beautiful. I see it as a necessary part of how we interact with each other as human beings. Support, wisdom of the collective. Yeah, so 10 people are going to have so much more to offer each other than one person has to offer him or herself, or one person has to offer another. Okay, collaborative and safe space. This is a safe community, a closed and private safe community to share, to struggle, to triumph, to celebrate, okay? And it's your community. It will be a sacred and special place that's yours, okay? We're talking small, all right? Okay, this is really small, but after this masterclass is over, you're going to get sent to my website and have all this information. But this is $75 a month, super nominal investment. This is not, I don't have any fancy like sign up card or 10 bonuses or sign up for this price in the next 5 hours or it's like $100 more. I don't have any of that. This is just a $75 a month subscription program, okay? It includes 2 45-minute live group coaching video calls per month, 2 a month. They're gonna be through Zoom, so everybody will be in it. Everybody will see each other. It won't be like this. It's going to include a creative focus on one coaching topic. So every session will have a coaching component. Every session will have a guided mindfulness meditation. So I will take you through a mindfulness meditation each session. It will have guided goal setting and time for Q&A and discussion, okay? It's a group, so it'll be very fluid and open in terms of sharing and asking questions. So it won't be just a Q&A at the end. It'll be fluid. Okay, all of the video sessions are going to be recorded and available to you. So if you miss them or you want to go back and listen to them, repeatedly, they'll be available. Bi-weekly accountability emails around your individual self-care goals. So on every other week that we don't have a live video session, you'll receive an email. And hopefully that'll come from an accountability buddy and somebody else in the group, and you will get paired up and be able to offer that to one another as part of the group, okay? And I can do that as well if that isn't working for some reason. You'll have a private Facebook group community with access to activities, handouts, things that I don't have in my newsletter and don't offer in my free Facebook group. So again, more depth, It's the how of self-care, and not just the, the sort of loose stuff that kind of floats up here, but really getting our hands dirty, so to speak. Okay. Occasional interviews, conversations with guest speakers on requested wellness topics. We can do that either live in the sessions or pre-recorded and sent to you. And this is strength-based. So as a social worker, my work is all strength-based. And what that means is we're not starting from a place of deficit. We're not starting from where you are not well, right? We're starting from what you know, what you're good at, what your goals are, and moving from there, okay? And that, you're the expert, I will guide this process, and that we collectively will be the community. Okay, you'll get suggested action steps, tips, tools, fresh ideas, all of that the practical stuff. Okay, you'll also receive special access to discounts for any of my individual coaching packages, future offerings. I am designing a 6-week online self-care course that should be ready by January. I also have some webinars that I'm doing, and some other offerings that you'll have discounts to. And of course, cheerleading and support from me every step of the way. So that is the package. This is truly a community. It's not just group coaching, but it's a community that I'm creating. And we will be able to be in touch on a very regular basis, and I'll be able to provide what I think is incredibly valuable content and accountability and support. So we're at an hour. I'm just going to take a couple more minutes and finish up. Just give you an example, some coaching topics that we'll cover: setting goals, identifying obstacles, assessing values, defining self-care, devising a smart and achievable plan, creating your own support system, finding the wellness tools that work for you. And that's important because everybody has different things that work for them. Using a positive mindset for permanent change, and EFT and the power of reprogramming. And if you don't know what EFT is, we can talk more about that. But I also have some videos of me doing some EFT in my Facebook group that you can access. And then some sample guided mindfulness meditations that we'll do, focusing on the breath. Of course, that's basic, but mindful eating, mindful listening, body scans, guided imagery, pain management, weight loss. So these are just sample mindfulness meditations that I will guide you through. Okay. Here are some testimonials. I'm just going to read these, and I have a video. I'm just going to take a couple more minutes of your time, and we're almost done. But these are some testimonials of some previous clients. This is Kelly. I worked with Ellen during a process of great transition. I needed help finding out how to balance my life. She did an amazing job of listening and helping me to see how much extra pressure I was putting on myself. She was incredibly knowledgeable and gentle with her approach. I couldn't believe how much things had shifted by the end of my work with her. I was putting so much energy into things that didn't really mean much to me. And if I hadn't worked with Ellen, I would have continued to be focused on the wrong things. I feel so much freedom in my life because I took the time to seek help from someone who has a wonderful gift. I'm so grateful I found Ellen. Now that's from Kelly. Oops. Oh dear. I guess that video is not playing properly. Well, that's Sherry. And I worked with Sherry, and she talks in this video about how she trusted me, and that she was also in a life transition, really had been in a number of different directions in her life in terms of employment and what she wanted to do. And she kind of kept bopping around, and she was afraid of failing. And so she never really committed herself to anything in particular, and wasn't feeling confident. And we worked really strategically around building confidence, but also building a plan, a written plan based on her strengths and her passions. And she decided to really move in the direction of being a personal chef, and was feeling like her, I forget exactly what she says at the end of the video, but that her business was a huge success and that she felt better than she ever had. So that's Sherry. I'll have to fix that video. This is Shane, a gentleman in his 60s. You were so good with language, active listening, and at utterly tamping down whatever energetic challenges of your own may have been percolating. I love that quote. So some testimonials. Okay, I truly feel like my coaching is transformational. Again, it's a word that's kind of thrown out a lot, but I have had a transformational life, and my work, my teaching, my coaching, my own work for myself, I believe it has to be transformational. That's what I'm going for all the time. And I'm trained to look at patterns in human behavior and mind and body. And I believe my value system, but also my training as a social worker and a metaphysical minister, that we are not meant to do this work alone. Okay, so I'm here to support your personal growth, and self-care is to care about yourself enough to get the support you need. Okay, that is us. That's the end. This is just a recap of a previous slide of the details of this community coaching program. When this masterclass ends, when I press end, you're going to get rerouted to the page on my website with all of this information and some more testimonials and the option to subscribe. It's a very simple subscription process where you can cancel at any time. Okay, so this is not keeping you in for like 6 months. It's not a 6-month group coaching thing. I really believe that this is a nominal investment. Of course, it completely depends on everybody's situation, but for the transformation and the support and the knowledge and information and accountability and everything that comes with this package, the community, I think it's an incredible value. I hope that you feel that also. I just want to say thank you for participating tonight, for being here, for being part of the community tonight, for putting this wellness and self-care energy out into the world by just showing up and participating tonight. If you have any Q&A session, we'll put that in here. I know we're after an hour, but if there's anything that you want to share or anything that you want to ask, if you think it's a bunch of hooey, let me know. I am very used to pretty intense feedback, because when you're a professor, the students do not hold back when they do your class evaluations to tell you what you think. I take it all seriously, and I want to know what people think. I think that you probably all have my email, but I'm going to put it in the chat just in case. If you want to reach out to me outside of this masterclass, there's my email, super easy. You are going to get redirected to my website, but I'm going to put it here also. If for some reason you don't get redirected, I've never used Demio before, but everything has worked pretty smoothly, so it should redirect. So just hang on once I end, and you should get taken right to the community coaching program page. I'm going to type in the link anyway while I just wait a minute to see if anybody has anything they want to say. Let's see. But I'm super grateful to all of you for being here. I am going to send out, I think it's actually, I set it up automatically that if you participated, you'll get the link to the webinar so you can watch and listen again. Okay, and I'm going to just put this here. This is the direct link to the coaching program, and there's plenty of places to subscribe on that page. Okay, guys, it is after 6 p.m. on the West Coast and of the US, and I have, I think people signed up from 4 different countries. So I hope that you guys got a lot out of tonight. Reach out, let me know, and I hope that some of you decide that this is the right time to sign up for this community coaching, and that you, thank you, and that you are able and willing to show up for yourselves and for others. Okay, and thank you. I appreciate all your work. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for the feedback. Okay, good night, everybody. I don't actually know how to end this, so I guess I'll have to figure that out. But let's see. End webinar. Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you so much.